Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bucks County Paranormal. I'm Eric Mintel, your host, also jazz musician, composer, pianist, and I'm also here with one of my favorite people in the ufology world, who is also an unbelievable author, a wealth of information on the paranormal, UFOs, and just life in general. And I want to welcome again Bill Birnes.
Oh, thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.
It's good to see you, man. There's so much to talk about. I mean, we could be here for all week. So just settle back and we're going to do it. But, I wanted, Bill was, and love Bill from the show UFO Hunters, one of my favorite shows. And the show that set that apart from everything else, I think, was the way you guys investigated the UFO sightings, the research that went into it, and the answers that you were able to get. Whereas maybe they have been investigated before, but they never really got down to the truth and what really happened. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about. Tell our viewers again, what are the latest, and Bill's also in the lecture circuit as well, and written, like I said, written a lot of books. But tell us what you're working on next. What's been going on lately?
Well, we've got, in the UFO world, the book that we are trying to set up as a series now is called UFOs in the White House, which came out earlier this year. And I've got another book coming out in a few months. It's the big book of UFO lists. So it's like the whole Earth catalog for UFOs.
Wow. And
that's coming out later this year.
Okay.
Or early next year.
And that'll be available at any bookstore and anywhere.
It's Skyhorse Publishing, traditional trade publishing. Okay. But the book that came out earlier this year is called UFOs in the White House. And the premise of the book is, what did our presidents know and when did they know it? And so in the book, we go back all the way to the 1680s. And
wow.
The 1670s, actually, was one of the first UFO sightings by Europeans, by colonists in North America. And this was UFO sighting on the Charles River. They called it the Charleston River, back in the 17th century, north of Boston. And there were these two fishermen, but they also were in what's known as a lighter, which is a rowboat, a heavier freight rowboat, a lighter. And they were on the Charles River, and they saw this, up in the sky, they saw this, they called it a floating pig. Before the days of Microsoft Windows, they called it a floating pig, a flying pig. And it was bright. And as they rode towards it, I'd never seen anything like this before.
Sure.
They rode towards it, and it changed shape into an ellipse. And as they kept rowing, suddenly, bam, they're back at the beginning from where they started.
Wow.
No memory of how they got there. And it's against the current, and the thing is gone.
And that brings up another story, the Allagash Abduction.
Right, it's the same thing as the Allagash Abduction.
The guys were on the water up in Maine, and they were fishing, night fishing. They set up a fire, and I'm sure people have heard this story too, but they set up a fire on the shore, a huge fire, could have burned for hours. They went out to go fishing. They saw the light, which was a huge light. I mean, illuminating the treetops. And again, same kind of thing. Before they knew it, the light came to them, and then they were back on the shore.
Right.
But there was a whole nother realm of things that happened in between there. Missing time, abductions. So where does this all stem from?
So here's the funny part about that. Their story winds up in the official history of the New England colonies, written by Governor Winthrop.
In the 1680s.
Yes. Yeah. So this is the fascinating part about it. Here's the British colonial governor, Winthrop, calling these people sober individuals and remarking at how strange it was that they had this incredible... They didn't call it craziness, insanity, kook jobs. These were sober guys. In years later, there was a USO that destroyed a whaling vessel.
USO meaning unidentified
submerged object. Comes out of the water, destroys it. So now you've got these two events at a time when just the following decade in Salem, they begin basically harassing women. It was a bunch of teenage bratty girls who complained about a slave, because slavery was legal in under the colonies in the 17th century. They claimed she was a witch. And that starts this whole witch hunt craze in the area around Salem town in Massachusetts. Who put a stop to that? Among the people who put a stop to that, because they said, this is insane. This is, you can't do this. You're executing people on no evidence. Was the fire and brimstone New England preacher Cotton Mather. Very famous New England preacher. But it was Cotton Mather who saw flying saucers on the moon.
Wow.
He's looking through a telescope and...
On the moon?
On the moon.
Wow.
And we know this because in the official NASA report on lunar anomalies, they begin with the Cotton Mather sighting in the 1690s.
Wow.
The person who said it's craziness to hunt for witches because there are no such things now is seeing flying saucers on the moon. So the whole point of the book is UFOs in the White House. It's UFOs in American history, but at the very tippy top of our executives. And so that's the whole point, starting in the New England colonies, going all the way to the 2016 campaign, and how all the way around the edges, you see these like smatterings of UFO lore. So Hillary Clinton is asked on the campaign trail. They ask her, so are you going to tell the truth about UFOs? And Hillary says, yeah, I'm going to tell the truth about UFOs as long as it doesn't compromise any defense secrets, any military secrets. Well, and you say to yourself, Hillary? Why would Hillary Clinton know about UFOs? What in the history of the American presidency would enable a former First Lady, as well as a Secretary of State and a Senator, to know about UFOs? Well, Hillary, in the 90s, had been a guest of Laurance Rockefeller at the Rockefeller Ranch, out in I think it's Wyoming or Colorado.
Wyoming, yeah, okay.
And Rockefeller, Laurance Rockefeller, was encouraging her. He was lobbying her, basically. He was lobbying Hillary Clinton to get Bill Clinton, who was then in the White House, to open up an investigation of UFOs. And so she was doing that. And the two of them were kind of conspiring, like, what would help Bill Clinton? And remember, when Bill Clinton first took office, he had asked his Deputy Attorney General, Webb Hubbell, to find out about what the government knew about UFOs. And that's when Bill Clinton said, this is a quote from Bill Clinton, this was really what stemmed my interest in the book, really, in doing the book. Bill Clinton said, his quote, I discovered there was a government within the government. This is not the deep state. The deep state is the basic government bureaucracy. Thank God we have a government bureaucracy. I mean, seriously.
That's a whole nother show.
Having worked in it, I'm happy. Okay, I work for the DOJ, so I'm more than happy that we have a deep government bureaucracy. Please, it's keeping us alive. But Bill Clinton says it's a secret government. And there was a book all the way back in the 70s or I think it was the 70s, late 70s, called The Secret Government. I want to say Stephen Wise wrote the book. And back in the 80s, I'd written a book with somebody who worked on a J. Edgar Hoover assassination squad. And he talked about a secret government. So, I mean, suddenly Bill Clinton pops up and says there's a secret government. They won't talk about UFOs. Hey, that's news.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Flash forward 2 more years. So that was 95. Now flash forward
to 97.
2 years.
Which is then going to be the 50th anniversary of Roswell.
Not only is it the 50th anniversary of Roswell, but in March 1997 are the Phoenix Lights.
Right.
And Bill Clinton on that night is supposed to be at the golfer Greg Norman's house. He suddenly becomes incommunicado. And the story is, oh, he twisted his knee, he can't move. Oh, the president, oh, my God, the president gets hurt. I mean, they will send a Chinook to get this guy and bring him back. You don't sit at somebody's house hurt,
Yeah,
okay?
exactly.
So they, and then the Phoenix Lights, we have witnesses, we have video, we know what's going on. Governor Fife Symington of Arizona, in Phoenix, says, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. So I want to call a news conference, get to the bottom of this whole story. It's crazy. Now remember the Frances Barwood story? She says, gee, what are these lights doing above the Sky Harbor Airport?
There was a huge formation of lights, if people aren't familiar
Exactly,
with that.
that floated over the Sky Harbor Airport, over Paradise Valley, and people were seeing this thing from
For
their
hours.
porches for hours.
For hours.
Exactly.
It was so slow.
And they actually saw the object, a huge,
Triangle.
black, translucent triangle. You could see the starlights through it. So this is what's so weird. So people see this. Bill Clinton disappears. Frances Barwood, who's a city council member, says, why is there this object over the Phoenix airport, Sky Harbor Airport? And suddenly she becomes the object of derision. They call her Beam Me Up Barwood. The mayor turns against her, the council, she's ridiculed in the press. And she said, I didn't say it was a UFO. I just said, why is there an object in a restricted air zone over an airport interfering with air traffic? Why is that? That's all she's saying. And now she is. So Fife Symington says, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Calls a news conference. Press is all assembled. And in walks a 6-foot alien. And
Takes the mask off.
Symington says, you're under arrest, takes the mask off, and is chief of staff. And people are furious. We interview Symington 11 years later. And Symington says to us, right on camera, people were getting too hepped up. I had to break the mood. It's crazy. We said, Governor Symington, come on. Why? And he's going on, and he said, but Governor Symington, you were standing in your backyard
And
when
saw the
that
lights.
craft came over. Did you see the lights? So he looks at us and says, see the lights? I saw the craft.
Yeah.
He said it was so close, if I picked up a rock and threw it, I would have hit it. That's how close it was. So why didn't you say it? He said, I'm saying it now. I went, no. Why didn't you say it
Then.
11 years
Yeah.
ago? He said, I was trying to lighten the mood. And then he says, and after that whole thing, Bill Clinton gave me a pardon because he'd been in court, he'd been in judges' chambers that day because he was indicted and going to jail for corruption. They're discussing his sentence. They're discussing his plea and everything in court. That morning, that afternoon, he has the news conference. Then Bill Clinton gives him a pardon.
Wow.
Hello?
Wow.
That prompted me to say, come on. There's got to be a deeper story here. Okay? I mean, out of nowhere, and then Fife Symington's cousin was Senator Stuart Symington. Stuart Symington had run for president. But before he ran for president, what was Stuart Symington in 1948? Secretary of the Air Force.
Wow.
He was one of the first secretaries of the Air Force after the services split.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
So, Laurance Rockefeller. Why would Laurance Rockefeller care about UFOs? Come on. They don't use oil. I mean, why? What did the Rockefellers do that put them into the UFO world? And this is part of that book. This is why that got me so excited. It's 1938. What happened in 1938? Besides the beginning of World War II was starting up in 39. But it's 1938. America is fighting a war in the Far East against Japan, a guerrilla war in China. And Germans are on the march, invading Poland, invading Austria. And in 1938, in Halloween, the Mercury Theater of the Air presents The War of the Worlds. Now, The War of the Worlds, as written by H.G. Wells, was a satirist. This is not, I mean, you could say, oh, science fiction and the Martians and the crawling things in the earth. No, he was a satirist. The point of H.G. Wells, if you read the book, the point of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, the premise of the book is that Britain in the he wrote the book in 1897. In the 1880s through the last quarter of the 19th century, Britain was the strongest power on the planet. They were an empire. This was the remains of Queen Victoria's empire, the strongest empire on the planet. The sun did not set on the Union Jack. From the Middle East to India to Asia, that was Britain. The mightiest army in the world. They defeated the Germans. They defeated mightiest army in the world. And that army is met by the Martians. And they are decimated. Cities are destroyed. Beaming rays, power rays. What defeats the Martians?
Common cold.
Virus. The smallest life form on the planet
Puny. Yep.
defeats the Martians, who do not have the immunity. Now, I can go into the science of the period and everything else because H.G. Wells was really smart. But anyway, the point is, it's a satire. The greatest armies in the world cannot defeat a foe, but the smallest piece of life on Earth can defeat a foe. So Laurance Rockefeller, so the Rockefellers, working for the Rockefellers, right here in Princeton, here we are, this is center, is Frank Stanton. Frank Stanton would become the president of CBS. He worked for Bill Paley. Before he became the president of CBS, Frank Stanton, along with somebody else who we don't have the time to talk about, was working on the science of analytics. Analytics. It defines politics today. Go to Politico or Huffington Post or any of the news services. It's all about analytics. Listen to Steve Kornacki on MSNBC. All about analytics. Frank Stanton was one of the early inventors of analytics, all the way back in the 1930s. Frank Stanton is also running at Princeton, right down the street. He's running the Rockefeller Foundation, centered at Princeton, right here on Nassau Street. And Frank Stanton finances Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater of the Air to produce the radio broadcast of War of the Worlds. That's what the Rockefellers did.
Yep.
Even though every half hour to 15 minutes there are station breaks saying this is
this is
a
just
show,
a show.
this is not
But,
news.
and it also happened right down the street in Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Well,
which is
here's the
another-
point. Exactly. So what happens is, where do the UFOs come down? In Grover's Mill, right on
Yeah.
the other side of right by Heightstown Road.
Yeah.
Right in Cranberry.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is, the news reports are, oh, there were riots in the streets. People, you know what? There weren't. It was fake, because what Frank Stanton did was fake the news about the response. That story, financed by the Rockefellers, became the basis for the Rand study 20-odd years later about what would happen if people knew about UFOs. It was even back in 1930s, it was a cover-up. Well, the point that I'm trying to get to is, it's a Rockefeller telling Hillary Clinton in 1995, 2 years before the Phoenix Lights, that she should get her husband, who's the president, to investigate UFOs. And what happens 2 years later? He investigates UFOs, lets Symington off the hook after what Symington did. And I'll tell you, that is one story of presidents and UFOs. Ronald Reagan is another story of presidents and UFOs.
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter is another story of
Nixon
presidents
was
and
another
UFOs.
one.
Richard Nixon and Jackie Gleason, one of the great stories that Julie Nixon knows because She's the one who talked about ghosts in the White House on the Colbert Report years ago.
So for some of our viewers that don't know what happened with Nixon, back in, I guess it was maybe around 1971, 71, Nixon was going to disclose the UFO information to the public, to the American public.
Exactly.
And he hired a documentary film crew to gather all the information, and they were going to disclose it on a show, on a movie called UFOs Past, Present, Future.
There you go.
So.
Never aired.
Never aired. It aired, but not the way it should have aired.
Right, exactly.
It should have aired, but they had Rod Serling hosted it. Burgess Meredith was in it. You've got a lot of stars of the day were as narrators. But Nixon had more information. There was a lot more to that story.
Oh, my God.
So much more.
There is a story. It is like there's an ocean underneath that story because, first of all, fly back to the 1950s. And there was a book called Stranger at the Pentagon. And in Stranger at the Pentagon, Valiant Thor, who knows? Valiant Thor from Venus, Val Thor, shows up at the White House. He wants to talk to President Eisenhower. Well, Eisenhower says, I want to talk to some alien from outer space. Now remember, Eisenhower was the guy who supposedly structured a treaty with the aliens back in '52. So he says, he says to Nixon, here, you handle this. So Nixon hosts this Valiant Thor person, this extraterrestrial, from Venus, by the way, at the Pentagon. So according to this book, Stranger at the Pentagon, Nixon was completely involved in the whole UFO story, trying to unravel the mystery of UFOs. Flash forward into the late 60s, into the 70s, Nixon is now... He wants to reveal the truth. He is among the chief executives
leave a legacy behind.
who
That's
says,
one of his
I
things.
want this to be my legacy to reveal the truth about UFOs. So he contracts to do this movie, going to tell the real story. But everything in the movie goes wrong. Because Nixon is now bumping flat up, face forward, right into the bureaucracy of the military, who says you can't do this. Because first of all, you're talking about military secrets.
And the centerpiece of this film was the Holloman Air Force Base landing.
Exactly.
The Army base, or the Holloman Air Force Base, had footage, pretty much 600 feet worth of film of this craft coming down. It looked like it was in trouble, and there was a film crew that just happened to be filming maneuvers.
Gordon Cooper talks about this. Yes, the astronaut Gordon Cooper talked about this.
And that was the whole centerpiece of this UFOs Past, Present, Future. But at the last minute, the footage is missing.
Suddenly
gone.
It disappeared.
Yeah.
Right. But Cooper talked about this before he died. He talked extensively about, he was there, watching this. And he says somebody came down from Washington, took the film, the raw footage that they took of the UFO, took it back to Washington, never saw it again. So one of Nixon's best friends was the comedian Jackie Gleason. Jackie Gleason had a library of the paranormal bigger than Shirley MacLaine's. I mean, he was devoted.
Wow.
To all of Shirley MacLaine's stories about the paranormal. He was an aficionado of the paranormal. Gleason and Nixon they both were friends with Bebe Rebozo down in Florida. The great one lived in Florida, broadcast from Florida. Terrible drunk, by the way. But he was fascinated by UFOs. And for years, Gleason would say to Nixon, you got to show me this. You got to show me the aliens. You got to tell me about the flying saucers. And Nixon would say, I can't talk about it. Jackie, I can't do this. It's a national security secret. I can't do this. You're asking me for things I can't do. Finally, one night, great story Gleason tells. One night, he spoke to all of his friends. One night, Nixon shows up alone
at the gate with Gleason.
Alone at Gleason's house. And says, get in the car. They drive out to Holman Air Force Base.
And one of the guards is like,
And the guards is
like,
looking.
what?
He's like stunned. It's the president. It's Jackie
Just
Gleason.
by himself.
Why are you here? Where's the Secret Service? Where's the, they drive onto the base, and there Nixon shows them UFO artifacts, and the highlight, he shows them a dead alien. Well, we spoke to Gleason's widow. Well, we spoke to Gleason's
Jackie
wife.
was changed right after that.
Oh, Jackie,
too. He
his
was
whole
out.
life
Yeah,
changed.
right after that.
It was like, ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
And his wife said, his wife was the sister of June. Remember the old Jackie Gleason show? They would do the June Taylor dancers and everything, right? Okay. Well, he married June Taylor's sister, Barbara. And she said that when Jackie came back after this event, he was a changed human being. I spoke to the head of Sony Pictures, who wanted to buy UFO magazine from me 1,000 years ago. And he said that Jackie, they were making the movie Nothing in Common with Tom Hanks at Sony, and Jackie was talking all around the set about the alien. I would love to hear from Tom Hanks about whether Jackie spoke to him, but he spoke to people at Sony about it.
Wow.
And they believed flat out that Jackie was telling the truth.
There are so many stories, I think, we were talking about everybody. We've got like a minute and a half here, but we were talking about, we may have to do part 3, Bill. You may have to come back. Bill, I think you're going to be a permanent fixture here. But, we were talking about, Kurt Russell's sighting with the Phoenix Lights. So I'm sure there's a whole another, show that we could talk about that. But we didn't get to Lonnie Zamora. I want to talk about that. We want to talk about Betty and Barney Hill. So that would be for. We'd love to come. I'd love to have you come back.
The last 50 seconds. Here's the key about Betty and Barney Hill. When people say that was a fake and this and that, interracial couple, married.
1961. This happened.
7 years before Loving versus Virginia, which outlawed the prohibition of interracial marriage in America. So they were not the poster children of interracial marriage. They didn't want to be. They were a very private couple. Barney had hypertension. He was suffering. Betty was a social worker. Barney was a postal worker. The last thing they ever wanted to be was on the cover of a magazine. And the only reason they were is that the person transcribing their sessions with their psychiatrist,
Benjamin Simon,
with Dr. Simon, that person revealed those notes to a reporter for the Boston Traveler magazine. That's how the story slipped out. It would have never gone public otherwise.
That's going to be our next show.
There you go.
That's our next show. Betty and Barney Hill.
In fact, what we should do, if we're going to do that, let's bring in Betty's niece, who is a witness, Kathy Martin. We'll call her up. We'll bring her in. She'll be on the phone.
Sounds good.
There you go.
I'm there. Bill.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Good seeing you.
So always good to see
seeing
you, man. Always good to see you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and you got to check in with us again. It's like my mind is expanded today like crazy. But thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.